That's crazy. Oh my gosh, that's so cool. I love numbers. I love stats. Hi, my name is Adriana, and today I'm going to go over my reading stats for all of 2022. As I mentioned in that intro clip and in the title of this video, we're going to go over all of my stats. I have a list right here of everything I want to go through, so just real quick, I'm going to go through my Goodreads stats, storygraph stats, I'm going to pop up a word cloud of all of the titles, books per month, average book length, median book length, total pages, total audiobook hours, total spent, percent of books purchased versus read, graphs. It's gonna be great. So if that sounds like a good time, please stick around and consider liking and commenting on this video and subscribing to my channel if you like bookish things. So as I mentioned, starting with Goodreads, they have my longest book as Priory of the Orange Tree with a total of 848 pages, my shortest book as Kowalski's in Love, a little Sigma Force short story at 27 pages. They're saying my average book length was 376. I have a different number because I only go off of my books that I physically read with my eyeballs. I don't include audiobooks in with my average page count number because I don't. So as far as popularity, the book I read this year that has been most shelved is Ernest Hemingway's The Old Man and the Sea, which was a bit surprising to me. I thought it was going to be something more modern, I guess, but maybe a lot of people just really want to read old books. And then my least shelved is The Broken Oath by Pablo Suarez. Again, this makes sense. It's a self-published novel that he put out this year. He put it out in 2022, so it's still like relatively new. Read it. Shelve it. Make it more popular, please. It's very good. My average rating for 2022 was 4.1 stars. I don't remember what I counted my average as because in my spreadsheet I do break it down to 0.25 stars. The highest rated book on Goodreads is, again, The Broken Oath by Pablo Suarez. Again, this makes sense. Self-published tends to get really high ratings because they are sending out the book to people they think will enjoy it, and it's not just pushed out to whoever. And that is all of my Goodreads. So let's jump over to Storygraph. So I way met my goal of 50 books, so we're good there. Met my goal of 14,000 pages, so we're good there. So looking at moods graph, most of what I read was adventurous, which makes sense. I read a lot of kind of fantasy, sci-fi, thriller, adventure sort of things. Next was emotional. Again, that makes sense. I love a good cry. Mysterious, reflective, dark, lighthearted, funny, and then kind of peters off from there. I would say this is an accurate portrayal of how I feel when reading. Most of what I read was medium paced, a third of it being fast paced, and very few of what I read is slow paced. Again, that makes sense. I read a lot of action, adventure, fantasy, thriller sort of stuff. Page number, I had about 20% over 500 pages. About half of it was 300 to 500 pages, and then 25% was below 300 pages. I would like to read longer books. It's constantly something I'm pushing myself towards, is to read big books, but I've also really enjoyed a lot of the short books I've read, so I can't totally discount short and medium length books. Just a quick fiction versus nonfiction breakdown. They break out genres into so many. So this is gonna look very different from my own genre breakdown graph just because I don't break it out as much, and a lot of these bars that they have overlap quite a bit. My number one genre on this breakdown is fantasy, and then my number two is LGBTQIA+. I'm sure a lot of my fantasies, not a lot, but a couple of my fantasies do fall into that LGBTQIA+ genre, as well as, I don't know what they have listed as historical. Yeah, so some of what they have listed as historical, like the Poppy War trilogy, I just have in straight fantasy. Some of the Greek mythology stuff, I think depending, my Greek mythology books, I always struggle to like break them down genre-wise because some of them definitely feel more historical fiction and I will slot them into there, and then some of them are obviously a lot more fantastical when they include like the gods as characters and like that kind of stuff, so I kind of leave that up to interpretation myself. They have a history of what comes next in this historical breakdown. I've slotted it as sci-fi, so I mean there's some give and take there. But overall, I would say this is probably not inaccurate, but I mean, especially including something like young adult in a genre when young adult is not a genre, it's an audience. I don't know how much I agree with how they break down that. This format graph is inaccurate because I'm not very good at picking out the exact edition that I'm currently reading in Storygraph, but in my own chart I will have like ebook, audiobook, paperback, hardback, a little more solid than this, but I usually am pretty good about making sure I select an audiobook edition, so I think that audiobook number is probably accurate. And then most read authors, obviously James Rollins is going to be one at the top. I'm doing a reread of the Sigma Force series, as well as I read one of his fantasy books this year. Kate McMullen, she is the author of all of those middle grade, why am I struggling right now? These middle grade Greek mythology chapter books that I binged a bunch for a readathon, so that makes sense. And then number of books and pages per month. This is kind of a cool graph to see. I definitely increased my reading over the year, which is really, really nice. I will have kind of more of a breakdown later on of exactly how many books I read, but if you feel like counting, you can pause and count here. And then going down to star ratings, they have my average as a 4.17. So they have me mostly at 5 stars, which makes sense. I give out a lot of 5 stars. I pick out books I think I will love, and I typically do love them. I have my ratings breakdown kind of grouped in like all of my 4 stars, so like 4 to 4.75 all lumped together, so I think that'll be a little bit easier to follow. Those are all my Storygraph stats. So next up is my word cloud for titles. I just used a random website, I can't even remember what it was now, and copy and pasted all the titles of the books I read this month. Here it is. It looks like the biggest word is love, which makes sense. I feel like love is in like a lot of titles. Hades, I read all of those like little kid chapter books. I feel like Hades is in there a couple times. Gods, I don't know, a lot of kind of random stuff, but I don't know, it's cute. I like it. I feel like and would be a bigger thing. Where is and? Maybe it doesn't count small words. Whatever, I don't know. It's kind of cute. Doesn't really give you a whole lot, but it's cute. So next we'll look at books per month. I'll put up a little table here. My reading really increased over the course of the year. January, I only finished 2 books. February was 5. March was 7. April and May were both at 6. June was 7. July was 5. August was 9. September was 9. October is when I had that crazy readathon where I pushed myself very hard to finish a lot of books, and I did. I read 19 books in October, and then 6 in November, and 9 in December. So overall that gives me an average of 7.5 books a month, which is pretty good. So popping up on my stats, my average page length was, for my eyeball read books, was 371 pages. My median page length was 372. I spent a total of $1,062.70. Yeah, that's that. I have my average rating at a 4.12, and the percent of books that I purchased this year that I also read this year was 66.6%. Of course, a couple of the books I bought this year were gifts for other people, and then 2 or 3 of them are pre-orders that don't come out until this year, so obviously I wasn't going to be able to get those. So I was never going to be able to get to 100. 66% doesn't seem that bad. I am reading a majority of what I'm buying. So the total amount of pages I read with my eyeballs was 22,262, and my total audiobook hours listened to was 338.5 hours. That's crazy. Oh my gosh, that's so cool. I love numbers. I love stats. Alright, so for the graph portion, I'm going to look at my big screen because I got a lot of graphs and I'd like to be able to see them all at one time, but I will be sure to put them up on the screen so you can also see them as I talk about them. So starting with the genre breakdown, 2019 through 2022, as you can see, I get a lot more varied as the years go on. So 2022, lots of different colors and very spread out. I'm really, really loving that. A lot more fantasy. I guess not a lot more fantasy as compared to like my earlier years. A significant chunk of fantasy, which makes sense. I do love fantasy. I would love to try to like push some more sci-fi going into the next year, but we shall see. Moving on to my page length histogram, I have them all set to the same y-axis. That way I don't feel bad that I read longer books in 2019 because I read barely any books in 2019. So I'm reading a lot more books now. And also, you know, I am reading some pretty significantly long books, but as I mentioned, that average is kind of right in that 370 range. Next up is my series breakdown. So this is a pie chart of whether the book I'm reading is a standalone, the first in a series, the continuation of the series, or the end of the series. So this year, 22% of the books were the start of a series, 22% were the continuation of a series, and 7.7% were the end of a series. And then the rest were standalone, of course. So I do read a lot of standalones, so that makes sense. That is that breakdown. I will continue to keep starting series and probably never finish them. Up next is my histogram of the year the books I read were published. You can see a majority of what I read was published in the last 20 years. I found that's just kind of my sweet spot. I just really like newer books. Moving on to format breakdown. Again, this is just a pie chart of the format in which I read a book. So 34.1% of the books I read were audiobooks, 18.7% ebook, and 18.7% hardback, and then another 26.6% paperback. Obviously, my breakdown changed quite a bit when I discovered audiobooks, and then again changed pretty drastically when in 2021 I bought bookshelves and wanted to display books. It was probably a bit of a booktube effect as well. Before presenting the books I was reading on booktube, I didn't really care to have a physical copy, but now I really like it. And I've always grown up in a house with books, so I am happy to have a nice display of books up. And then finally, looking at my 2022 ratings. Like I mentioned, I had my average at 4.12, I believe. So that's kind of right in this range here. I tried a lot of new NetGalley arcs this year that didn't always work for me, so that's, I feel like, why I kind of have a little bit more of a tail down here than I normally do. But I did enjoy a majority of what I read. So that is good. That's all I got. I think that's all my stats. It's pretty great. So let me know what kind of stats you keep. Let me know what any of your important stats were. And thanks so much for watching, and I will catch you on the next video.